So admittedly, as of late, there has been a lot of confusion in the world. No, I don't just mean the big things or the folks that have completely lost touch with all of reality. Rather, I mean the things that bring us joy, like the definition of a performance car. 70 years ago, that was a performance car. 35 years ago, that was a performance car. Here's where we get to the confusion. Today, can we go so far as to saying that this is a performance car? So here we are again with another 2-liter direct-injected turbocharged gasoline engine from Mercedes-Benz. Now, technically, this one is not from Mercedes-Benz. We're the one that we drove in, say, the GLB45 or a GLA250. That's also a 2-liter 4-cylinder direct-injected turbocharged engine. However, that one is a derivation of a serial production Mercedes-Benz engine. This one is hand-built by AMG. They do make a couple of changes to change the output. Like, for example, a much larger turbocharger, and that has quite an impact. 382 horsepower and 354 pound-feet of torque. Now, the only option in a GLA45, as opposed to, say, a GLA250, where you could have it 2-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, this is only all-wheel drive and only goes through an 8-speed dual-clutch transmission. Now, the 8-speed, that sounds familiar because we drove that in the GLA250, the GLB35, as well as a GLB250. Here, it's tuned a bit differently for this engine. And there is some good news in terms of fuel economy, even with the increase in output. 20, 27, 23 combined, so still pretty respectable. But performance figures, that's really what this is about. Remember the CLA45 with this same engine? That was 4 seconds to 60. This is 4.3, VMAX 155 miles an hour. Yes, a German SUV. Well, if we're being honest with one another, it's really a crossover. But no, not 5,000 pounds. 3,913 pounds, or depending on how you express your weights and measures, 1,775 kilograms. With that, race mode. Little delay there, but oh, does it wake up at about 3,500 RPM, pulls to about 6,000, 6,200 RPM. This is the same wonderful engine that we experienced in the CLA45. However, this is a much better road for it. It is paired with that transmission that we talked about, the DCT. Here, it's very good in terms of matching the personality, and it does push you to change the gears. You get more out of it, especially in Sport Plus and race mode, by switching the gears yourself. That said, I have noticed one thing that I do have to complain about. I spent some more time in a GLB 250 and then that GLB 35, and I couldn't help but notice there are some occasions where when the transmission is in automatic mode, it does make some clunky shifts when it's under low speed situations and around town. Here, I don't want to say it's lightning quick shifts, but it does enhance the experience when you do push it aggressively, whether you're in automatic or manual mode. Aside from the fussiness and some of the transmission shifts, I have noticed something else now spending more time with this transmission in some of these AMGs, and that is the interaction with the safety systems, all the safety doodads. In the GLB35, it was way too much. It didn't give you enough of a leash. In this, in race mode, it gives you all the leash you want, where we can push it like you can see on camera today. However, if you're in sport mode or anything below that, even driving around town like basic mode, you feel the interaction of the safety system way too much. I think someone kind of turned up the dial on the safety setting. Perhaps they need to bring it down a bit, provide a bit more trust to drivers that would prefer their GLA with a very healthy side dish of AMG. You and I have already established that this is a crossover. In the previous GLA 250 episode, we established that it's front-wheel drive biased even when fitted with the all-wheel drive system. So how does one go about making a front-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive crossover into a performance vehicle, at least aside from adding more power? Well, there's two areas they would need to focus on. Number one, making the vehicle stronger, and then number two, trying to send as much power to the rear wheels. Let's start with the first one, making it stronger. Underneath the vehicle, a lot of additional bracing takes up residence, very similar to what we saw in the CLA45 and the BMW X5M. In the front of this vehicle, there's an additional shearing plate that sits underneath the subframe as well as the engine that adds more lateral stiffness. Moving to the rear of the vehicle, it takes after the BMW X5M, where they have these two, best way to describe them, triangles, one on either side of the vehicle. Like the front, they increase the lateral stiffness, but they're also designed to increase the torsional rigidity of the overall structure. Okay, so now that we've made the baby buggy stronger, we could send more power to the rear wheels, but how do we do that? Well, this is where we take a page out of the GLA250 on which this is based, or the GLB35 I've already driven, and that there's a multi-plate clutch that sits between the front and the rear of the vehicle, and that's what determines how much torque can go to the front or the rear, generally up to about 50% in either direction. But we learned in the GLB35 episode that the AMG engineers tuned a couple of more parameters into that clutch to be able to get more torque to the rear wheels under more circumstances, not just losing traction in the front of the vehicle. Now, in addition to that, there is a second clutch that sits in the rear of the vehicle that can divide the torque side to side. So if you're keeping score, there's two clutches that can vary the torque front to back or in the rear side to side. So we got to call out the obvious here. This is probably the worst concept, equation, whatever you want to call it, of package. You're going to put some sort of performance bits into it and make a car go fast. But here it works incredibly well, not as well as we experienced in the GLA45. Pushing it very hard around corners like this, you really don't notice pitch. Instead, what you notice is squat in the rear corners. Like, for example, going around a turn like this, turning to the left, I'm feeling the squat in the rear right wheel, and then same thing over here. Where I'm turning to the right, I feel a lot more squat in the left rear wheel. Then the harder job is to control dive and squat in a front wheel drive vehicle. Here I take my hat off to the engineers because there's virtually no dive in the thing, and the only squat is what we discussed. Now, the big reason why you feel that oddness of that like rear corner squat is because of the dimensions of the vehicle. This is what, a little over an inch taller in ground clearance than the CLA, but more importantly, it's 7 inches higher. I mean, it's a 7-inch taller vehicle, and it's 300 pounds more. So that extra weight, it's a lot of extra weight, it's where that extra weight is high in the vehicle that impacts the driving dynamics. Somewhat related to that, and also filed under the heading of not the same as the CLA45, is a bit of ride quality difference. It's something unusual. I wouldn't call it waft, and that there's like a looseness from side to side. Again, it's not pitch, but you can feel the extra height in the vehicle as you're going down the road. It's not just around corners like this, it's even high-speed situations when you're going down a straight. It's more of a stability issue than it is like a pitch. Does it change the ride quality terribly? Does it make it a bad vehicle? No, it's just the reality of the size of the vehicle, the height of the vehicle, rearing its ugly head on the wonderful driving dynamics that are suspending the vehicle. But now you and I need to check in on steering, and here it's very similar to what we've experienced in other middle-of-the-road to full-fat AMGs. Good feedback, it's very direct, but the weight, that's the problem here. I wouldn't expect any better weight or heavier weight in like regular, to say, sport mode, but this is the 45, man. This is a full-fat AMG, and you can see you can push this thing really aggressively, and as such, they've got a race mode, which is magnificent to use, but it could really use better weight to the steering. That's really the only piece of feedback that I would change here, because you really can't fight the dimensions of the vehicle, but if you can change the steering, make it a bit more in character with it, that would be wunderbar. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the options game with today's contestant. Something I really can't refer to as a baby buggy. Maybe a daddy buggy or a buggy for an incredibly cool mommy, either way you'd call it. The 2021 Mercedes AMG GLA45 for a base price of $54,400. To that we add the color. Now, I love me a Mercedes, but I do not like that they charge extra for silver. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't silver like the historical country racing color for Germany? So why would you charge an extra $720 for iridium silver. To that, we add the color on the inside, which is black and red, but most importantly, it is leather. It does look good with the silver, I gotta say, and you are paying extra, not so much for the color of the two-tone, rather the actual grain of leather, $1,450. To that, we add the 21-inch cross-spoke matte black wheels, which I have to admit, even with silver, look magnificent, $2,050. Then the bane of my existence in the Mercedes world, even more so than silver, charging extra for Sirius XM radio in an almost $55,000 car, $460. The MBUX Assistant, $200. The Burmester stereo. Now normally I love these, especially in Porsche and Mercedes, but this is kind of like the bargain version. It is $850, which I'm happy about. But I gotta tell you, it's not great. I don't think I would pay the extra $850. Then we press on to the driver's assistance package, and I've told you in many previous episodes that this is incredibly important in all Mercedes because it adds the level 2 autonomy. No, this is not a self-driving car. Rather, it's an adaptive cruise control system, $1,700. Then we add the multimedia package. Most importantly, this is the augmented reality navigation system. This is an incredibly cool trick where they layer different types of metadata on top of each other. The GIS data, the data from the forward-facing camera, as well as graphics for turn-by-turn directions, well worth it at $1,295. Then the night package. This is the blackout trim on the car. Normally, I do not like it on these cars, especially in that blue wagon, the E63S, with that beautiful color blue. That would look better with like the satin finish chrome. This does look better with the black trim at $750. Then the AMG Aero package. This does make the car look pretty cool. It's the flicks on the front of the car, the diffuser in the back, and the very obnoxious, very large wing, which really does make the car look better, $1,550. Then we press on to the Dynamic Plus package. And yes, this adds the AMG steering wheel with the AMG mode control buttons on either side of the steering wheel. But more importantly, it adds the race and drift modes to the vehicle and larger brakes in the front, 14.2-inch diameter rotors. That would be $2,050, money well spent. And the only other thing we add is the destination and handling from Rastatt, Deutschland, $1,050 for a total retail price of $68,650. Now there are three other rather important items we need to attend to. Two are technical and one is rather subjective. The first technical item are the brakes, and that is an area that it's very similar to the CLA45. They work incredibly well, and that's because they're larger rotors front and rear. The feedback is good, the pedal modulation is good. The only thing you notice here different from the CLA45 is when you do like really heavy panic stops, you can feel the lightness in the ass end. The car almost wants to pick itself up and plant the ass end somewhere else. And then the seat. Yeah, I'd call this one a technical item as well because it's just too flat. It doesn't have those optional seats, those Recaro seats we experienced in the CLA45. And just look at how aggressively one can push this thing. You need the extra bolstering. I would argue even in the most basic seat, there should be bolstering in the seat bottom. That's what's missing. Seat back is fine. It's the seat bottom that needs some help. And now on to the third, more subjective item. And that would be the carrying case. You see, this is incredibly fun to drive, if you could not tell from today's episode. Yet my only quarrel with it is the way it looks, which brings us to the wish list. I do not think that there is a market big enough for both a GLA45 and a GLB45. However, to my eye, the GLB is far more attractive, and when you consider how good the running gear of this vehicle is, even though it is based on a front-wheel drive vehicle, I would vote for the GLB45 over a GLA45. And this is where I turn the episode around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And is there anything else we should add to the wish list? But most importantly, I do want you guys to weigh in between the design of the GLA versus the GLB when it comes to an AMG, a full-fat AMG version of this platform. Until I see you in the next episode, hopefully with a car that is not silver, Bis später.